Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with Dara. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Dara Kam, senior writer at the News Service of Florida. Today we're taking a deep dive with Dave Aronberg, state attorney for the 15th Judicial Circuit. And we're talking about Florida Democrats' chances in the 2022 elections and the opioid crisis. Dave was elected as state attorney in 2012 and re-elected without opposition in 2016 and 2020. His career includes a stint in the state Senate, where he served for 8 years. Fun fact, Dave was the youngest state senator when he was elected to the upper chamber in 2002. Listeners who are early birds may have seen Dave on Morning Joe, where he's a regular guest.
I think it's going to be a question of who has the best chance of winning against this current governor.
Who has the best chance of winning against this current governor?
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
I am so jazzed today to have a special guest with us, Dave Aronberg, state attorney for the 15th Judicial Circuit in Palm Beach County. And Dave, you are one of my OGs. I was looking at your bio on your webpage, your office's webpage, and I saw that you were elected to the state Senate in 2002, which means that we've known each other for 20 years.
I can't believe it's been 20 years, Dara.
I know.
One of us has aged much worse than the other, and you know who I'm talking about.
I do.
So
the whole world knows.
Ages you fast.
Watching politics from the sidelines ages you maybe at an even speedier rate, my friend. So I want to talk today about two things. I want to talk about politics, and I also want to talk about the opioid crisis. But let's just dig right in. Let's dive right in with the state of the state in Florida with Democrats running for governor. We've got a lot of races up this year. We've got Governor DeSantis, who seems to be unbeatable. So just tell me, what do you think Democrats' chances are in Florida this year?
I don't think that Governor DeSantis is unbeatable, but I do think it's clearly an uphill battle because he's got over $120 million to spend. Although, after a certain amount, those extra dollars don't really mean much. The monetary advantage only matters up to a certain point. And you've got two Democrats running who I think, have stories to tell. If it's Nikki Fried, she's a woman who can speak passionately about the overturning of Roe versus Wade and how that's going to affect women in the state and everyone for that matter. Charlie Crist, you've got someone who is a known commodity, and he's someone that they're going to have a tough time accusing of being socialist or whatever all the, what the smear machine will do, because people know him already. So it's much tougher to define him because they know who he is. And then the question is our state ready to flip blue? And I think obviously that's a tougher one because of the way the last election went when Trump increased his numbers in Florida. Miami-Dade, which is traditionally a blue stronghold, lost 2 congressional seats, and it looks like the Republicans are making gains amongst non-Cuban Hispanic voters. And so this is the challenge for Democrats. You have that in a climate where inflation is clearly a real issue, a real problem, gas prices, and the party in power, namely the Democrats, because they control the White House, loses seats in Congress every year, every time there's a midterm, with few exceptions. So you've got headwinds, you've got other issues in Florida, you've got a monetary disadvantage, and you've got a governor who's a national figure and who's already looking ahead to 2024 to run for president.
So you touched on a lot of things there. I wanted to ask, Charlie is a known entity. That's both a plus and a minus for him, though, isn't it? I mean, just look at what Nikki's been doing. It's funny that we call Nikki and Charlie, and we call DeSantis. And it's funny. You can never figure it out. We called Jeb. We called Rick Scott. So anyway, we're calling Nikki and Charlie, but Nikki has been really hammering Charlie on some of his abortion votes and his, being chain gang Charlie. So is his known entity a plus or minus for him?
Yeah, I think in a general election, it's a plus because if you can make the election about Ron DeSantis, then I think that's an advantage. If they make the election about a Democrat who is portrayed as being, socialist and inflationary and whatever, all the mumbo jumbo they're going to say, then that's where the monetary advantage can really be exploited. I think it's harder to do that against Charlie. Now, with that said, there is a downside. Yes, I mean there is fatigue if with certain candidates, and hard to know if that exists with Charlie. But one thing that Nikki is promoting is that she's something new, and she is for her campaign. She's saying she's a breath of fresh air, something different, and she also is the only Democratic statewide elected official since she won a statewide race, and that shows that she can have statewide appeal. But you can see it both ways. I think ultimately the question for Democrats will be who has the best chance of beating Ron DeSantis. I think for Democrats, I don't think it's going to be as much of a question of ideological purity. I think it's going to be a question of who has the best chance of winning against this current governor.
Who has the best chance of winning against this current governor?
Well, if you look at polls that I've seen so far, it shows that Charlie Crist does better. But then again, the general public doesn't know Nikki Fried as well. And so that's sort of expected because, she has only run once before statewide. And so she is still trying to introduce herself to many Floridians. And so, yes, if you look at the polls right now, they'll show Charlie doing better in a head-to-head matchup with DeSantis. But you also have to realize that Nikki has not run more than one time, and that was a down-ballot race for agricultural commissioner. And so there may be room for growth there. So I'm officially neutral, as you can tell, in this race.
I see that. Yeah.
I'm friends with both.
Right.
But they're very different. This is a choice. They have the same views on issues currently. I mean, that's not the choice. The choice is, do you want someone who is well known amongst the public, or someone who offers something new? Now, there's pluses and minuses for both.
Sure.
And it's going to be up to Democratic super voters to decide because it's going to be a low turnout election in August, and the people closest to Democratic politics, who are probably the most knowledgeable about Democratic values and Democratic ideology, will be the ones who vote in this race.
So do you think that Val Demings, Congresswoman Val Demings from Orlando, she's raising a lot of money in her race against U.S. Senator Marco Rubio? She's trying to unseat him. Do you think she would have been a better candidate for governor? I mean, do you think that the Democrats have the strongest possible candidates that they have running in that race against DeSantis?
Well, I think Charlie was going to run regardless. I don't know if I assume Nikki would have run as well. So I think if Val Demings had gotten into that race, perhaps one of them would have shifted to the Senate race. But I think she still would have had a primary. I don't think both of them would have dropped out of the race. And so I think Val saw an opening where the DSCC recruited her, and she is a rock star. I mean, she's one of the few remaining political rock stars on the Democratic side in Florida, and the DSCC implored her to run. And as a member of Congress, I think it's just more of a natural fit that you go from Congress to Senate, just go across the hall. So I can't argue with her decision too much. I think also she saw that the incumbent, Ron DeSantis, is raising just unheard of amounts of money.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It is crazy. He's got $130 million in the bank. He just got a $10 million contribution from one donor. I mean,
yeah, who's that from? I heard of that. Did they reveal who that's from?
Yeah, I don't have his name in front of me right now. I can look it up. He's the guy from Las Vegas.
But yeah, it's $10 million. It's an unbelievable contribution. And then as soon as he got that check, he sent out a mass email blasting Michael Bloomberg as an out-of-touch billionaire. It's like, okay, well, how are you raising your money?
Okay, so the $10 million contributor is Robert Bigelow. he's funded research into the afterlife and said aliens are right under people's... Anyway, he's like a believer in the afterlife and paranormal activity.
Well, I, for one, welcome our new insect overlords. By the way, before people quote me, that's a Simpsons reference. So, yeah, I think it is an uphill battle because of the money. But, look, whether you have $120 million or $220 million, every extra dollar after a certain amount doesn't really matter. You can only buy so many TV commercials. You can only pay for so many hit pieces. And there'll be national trends here. And, DeSantis, I think this will ultimately be a referendum on him because he has become a national figure who has taken a lot of controversial stances. And we'll see what he says about abortion rights when he's on the campaign trail, because in the next legislative session, dollars for donuts, you're going to see additional restrictions on women's reproductive rights. And they will be wildly unpopular in Florida. But remember, Governor DeSantis is looking ahead to 2024.
Sure. Because
he's running for president. And so he knows he's got to court that MAGA crowd and compete with Governor Abbott of Texas, who's already done his own draconian abortion bill. And he doesn't want to lose a step with his right-wing competitors.
How big of an issue do you think that abortion will be in the Florida primaries in August?
I think it's a very big issue. Now, I think the bigger question is, will voters vote based on Charlie Crist's past, or will they vote based on the present? Because Charlie Crist and Nikki Fried currently have the same position on women's reproductive rights. There's no daylight between them. What Nikki Fried is pointing out is that when Charlie Crist was a Republican governor of Florida, he appointed a Supreme Court justice who is anti-abortion. And so, but, I don't know if that's going to be a big deal in voters' minds, because I think people want to know, where are you now and can they believe you? And it's not like, Charlie just changed his position overnight. I mean, he has been pro-choice for some time now. But yes, I mean, they can point. I mean, Nikki, it's fair game to point to someone's past record, and you just have to be able to explain it to the voters' satisfaction. I still think that the number one issue in voters' minds on the Democratic side when they vote in August will be who has the better chance of beating Ron DeSantis.
Right.
That's who will be our nominee.
Especially the base voters, who are the ones who show up in the midterms, in the primaries, in the midterms. I guess you run the risk, or there is also the possibility of folks thinking you get a lot of progressives, you get a lot of the progressive Democrats or the conservative Republicans turn up in primaries in a midterm, don't you? I mean, will that play into the calculus of these voters, or do you think it's like top of mind is going to be who can beat DeSantis in November?
One thing that is common across all different ideologies within the Democratic Party is Democrats want a winner. They want to win. And although there are some voters who are, pure ideologically in their minds, I think the overwhelming number just want to win. And if they saw that there was a choice between a pro-choice candidate and an anti-abortion candidate, then that would be different. But if you have two pro-choice candidates and one wasn't pro-choice earlier in his career, I still think that voters will say, which of these currently pro-choice candidates has the best chance of winning? And that's what's going to make up their minds.
What do you think? I mean, I chuckle when I see some of these national stories about Florida, might be turning red, or is Florida, going to be the outcome of this election is going to determine whether Florida is a red state or not. I mean, I made Florida a red state after Trump won Florida by 3 percentage points, more than 3 percentage points. To me, there's no question in my mind that Florida is now a red state. Am I wrong?
I mean, it's hard to argue with you. When the last election, Trump won by over 3 points. I think it was close to 4, maybe. And the two Democratic sitting members of Congress in Miami-Dade lost their seats. And I think it's what have you done for me lately? To change that narrative, Democrats have to start winning back these races. And one way to do it is to win back the governor's race or to take those congressional seats back. There are ways to change it. I mean, you're only as good as your last election. So right now, it's hard to argue with you when you say that Florida is a red state, because that's how it voted last election. But that could change. I mean, look how fast it changed in Arizona and Georgia. I mean, Georgia is a red state, right? Well, now they have 2 Democratic senators, and so now it's a purple state. So things can change pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Things can change. I think we've got now the Republicans who've controlled the Florida legislature for over 20 years are in charge of redistricting. And so you've got these newly drawn districts that are going to give Republicans even more of an edge in Congress, though. So how is that going to play out in Florida?
Well, yeah, those congressional seats, in my mind, violate the Voting Rights Act, violate fair districting in our state constitution. But the state Supreme Court did not hear that case and is postponing it. And so it's not going to be decided until after this election. And as a result, you're going to have this very skewed map in favor of the Republicans. And yeah, I mean, that's going to be an advantage to the Republicans. It could lead to Republican control in the House. And before, I thought it wouldn't matter because I thought the Republicans were certainly going to win enough seats in the House in November to regain control of the House. But because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, I think that it's hard to estimate what the impact of that's going to be at this point. I mean, that could change things so much that maybe Democrats have a lifeline to keep control of the House. I do think it helps them keep control of the Senate, and I think the candidates that former President Trump recruited in the Senate are going to help Democrats maintain control of the Senate. I believe that. In fact, I think Democrats are likely to gain a seat in the Senate. I think they gain the seat in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think Dr. Oz a Trump recruit, loses to Fetterman.
Should we bet dinner at your favorite restaurant in Tallahassee on that?
The Silver Slipper closed years ago. That's an old school reference for our friends listening.
It is.
Yeah, I'm talking about the U.S. Senate, not talking about the Florida Senate.
No, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. You're saying that the Democrats are going to pick up a seat in the U.S. Senate.
I do. I believe that. Yeah, I do.
Well, that would certainly.
Which seat do you think? I mean, if you think I'm wrong, which of the seats are the Democrats going to lose? I mean, at first we thought Georgia was a tough one, but they recruited one of the worst possible candidates in Herschel Walker, and that was a Trump recruit, and he's just embarrassing himself every time he speaks. And I just think he's going to lose. And I think Arizona, Mark Kelly's looking really strong. In Nevada, Adam Laxalt is struggling there on the Republican side. So I think the Democrats are going to hold their current seats and pick up the Pennsylvania seat. And don't sleep on Missouri and Ohio. Those are tougher ones. Not impossible to pick one or more of them up. Oh, and Wisconsin too. I can't forget Wisconsin, where Ron Johnson is not super popular. So
right.
Yeah, I would say the Democrats will stay in control of the Senate. I still think they probably lose the House, and we'll have divided government, but not impossible for the Democrats to prevail in the House because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Stick with us. We'll be right back with Dave Aronberg.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Let's dive back in with our special guest. I think maybe I'm so skeptical. You get a little bit jaded when you're in the kind of echo chamber in Tallahassee. The Democratic Party, the Democrats in Florida, like you mentioned, lost 2 congressional seats in Miami, in South Florida, in the last election. I guess I'm having a hard time seeing the strength of Democrats out because they are so weakened in Florida. And maybe that's my bad, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's why I'm looking elsewhere to other states
Right.
I really love Val Demings. I think she is a rock star. I just, I think that's an uphill battle to defeat Marco Rubio, but again, not impossible. It just, there are a lot of things that can happen between now and November. It's a lifetime in politics, so we'll see. But I just think that we have a really good shot. The Democrats do in Pennsylvania and perhaps some of these other states. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Oz lives in New Jersey, and he's running for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. That's tough when you live. You don't live in the state you're running to represent.
Right. And yeah, that is kind of crazy. And I haven't followed that race as closely, although I will say that somehow I got on Dr. Oz's email distribution list, and I get all these emails from his campaign. So I guess it certainly is a national race that people are watching on the national level. I mean, you're out there talking to Democrats in Florida all the time. You're on the ground. What's their level of enthusiasm going into the primaries? What do you think?
Things changed after the Supreme Court's decision, Roe versus Wade. You see, especially amongst younger people, they're much more motivated now. And so that is the thing that was not built into the numbers. When it looked like Democrats were demoralized, inflation, the lack of action on certain major issues like voting rights by the Biden administration really was deflating. And then you had this dramatic change where for the first time in history, a right was taken away. So people 50 years old and younger, they're now waking up to a different America that they're used to. And that is, we don't know yet the power of that. Will that change enough minds and motivate people to go to the polls? Because now the Republicans are, they got what they never wanted, which is that abortion is on the ballot now in every legislative race, in every gubernatorial race. And I think that will matter. How much? Hard to say.
We'll see. We'll have you back and talk about that in September. But before we finish up today, I wanted to shift a little to the opioid crisis that has been at your top of your agenda since you were elected to the Senate 20 years ago, right? Am I wrong? I think that's right. I think you came in with an agenda on that regard. You were the Pam Bondi's drug czar for a while.
Yeah. It's been a career priority of mine. I was working on that when I was a young assistant attorney general in the economic crime division when Bob Butterworth called me into his office in 2001. He was the attorney general back then and handed me a magazine article and said, there's this new drug out there that's killing people in Appalachia. I'd like you to research it and see if the company that's making it, Purdue Pharma, doing anything wrong. And that's how I got my start. It was 2001. And so I was one of the first to investigate Purdue Pharma for its marketing practices, which is why, when I was watching this series, Dope Sick, it's just hard to watch. Every episode, it takes a little piece of me because I lived through that. And I remember the lost opportunity we had back then. We did end up settling. I investigated them. I found they had committed wrongdoing, and then I left to run for the state senate, and then the state settled with Purdue Pharma shortly thereafter. And yeah, I wish things were a little different. I don't know how much more the state of Florida could have done, but when you look back to see that it was clear wrongdoing from this company, I just think they should have been held accountable a lot earlier than they were.
And we know so much more about what they were doing with the marketing through these multi-district litigation that's gone on and the settlements that have been reached over the past couple of years. I've written a lot about that. And, there's 0 degrees of separation now with opioid addiction, or there was at least several years ago when the state finally started to take some action to create what they call e-forces, the prescription data, the prescription drug database. We still have a lot of problems in that area. I don't know if, I'm sure you've heard that in Gadsden County, not far from Tallahassee, we've had a series of fentanyl deaths. I guess they're counterfeit drugs. They had 19 calls for overdoses in a 4-day period. The Gadsden County Sheriff told us not too long ago. So there's that has really sort of intensified the addiction issue because of these illegal drugs and fentanyl. I mean, I don't think that was around back in the day. If it was, it wasn't being used in the way that it's being used now. But the number of overdoses has increased dramatically over the last year, even, I think. And we recently saw a West Palm Beach doctor who was arrested for running a racket with the sober homes and using the racket, I guess, in the sober homes. Part of it is they do false, unnecessary medical tests, urinalyses on these folks. But tell me a little bit about the sober home dilemma that you've been tackling down in Palm Beach County.
Well, as part of my job as state attorney, we deal with all the state crimes here in Palm Beach County, and we saw that there was a huge number of these unscrupulous sober homes, these sober homes that are supposed to get people well. They're supposed to be drug-free group housing here, and they were just flop houses, unregulated flop housing. And we decided to go after it because that's part of our mission. And we found out pretty quickly that they were protected under federal law. The Americans with Disabilities Act protects sober homes from discrimination, and so local governments were afraid to regulate them. And another well-intended federal law, the Affordable Care Act, was unwittingly fueling a lot of the fraud because all the new benefits, so people can get insurance coverage for their behavioral health issues, it created a new pot of money that the bad actors were exploiting. And the more times they kept you in recovery, the more money they made. And so the money was in relapse, not sobriety.
Right.
And so the bad providers would encourage relapse.
That pisses
and
me
they would
off.
send you and they would send you to sober homes. Like the marketers would pay for you to have a one-way plane ticket to Florida. That's illegal. And then they put you up in a drug treatment center because you had good insurance. And then after the inpatient treatment ran out, you would be in outpatient treatment. Insurance covered it too. And then you live in a sober home. A sober home is supposed to just be a drug-free communal house. Insurance doesn't pay for it, but you pay out of your pocket. But the bad sober homes would say, hey, live here for free, because they then would get a kickback from the outpatient treatment provider. And so everyone was making money on this. Free
Right.
housing, kickbacks, free plane tickets, except for taxpayers, and especially the person who really was
Right.
hurt the most was the patient, who got the free drugs, free housing, and all the things until they left Florida in an ambulance or a body bag.
Right.
And so this is what's called the Florida Shuffle, and that's what we tried to eradicate. So we created this task force, and we've made 121 arrests, and we have largely cleaned up the drug treatment and sober home industries here in Palm Beach County. But the problem is that the problem has moved elsewhere now. It's spread. And as we've cleaned it up here, the problem has spread to other communities that are not aware of this problem or don't have sober homes task forces like we do. And so that's what we're trying to fix at the federal level, but we can't seem to get the attention of Congress. They don't seem to really care about this too much.
Where are the hotbeds now for this, as you call it, this shuffle? Where has it moved?
Well, we've seen it within Florida, moved to Broward County. We've seen it in nationally in Orange County. There's a big problem there. You go to a lot of the tourist destinations because people are recruited from all across the country to go to desirable destinations, South Florida, Southern California, and that's part of the scam is that, hey, you're gonna go and you're gonna go ride horses in Wellington, Florida, down here in Palm Beach County, or you're gonna go to the beach every day and surf, when really where they're taking you to is in probably an industrial area, not quite a paradise that they're promising. And then their incentive is to keep you in an unlimited cycle of relapse instead of a lasting recovery.
That's what's so reprehensible about this, is that addiction is so hard, especially these drugs that these folks are addicted to, the OxyContin, hydrocodone, those kinds of opiates are very difficult to kick. and you're preying on a really vulnerable population, I mean, it is just reprehensible. And I was looking, I saw that recently a federal court sentenced a former medical director of a West Palm Beach addiction recovery, it's a fancy word, sober home, to prison, and ordered him to pay more than $31 million in restitution for over $106 million in fraudulent claims they had made to private insurers and I think also the federal government. I mean, it's still going on. You're tackling it. Have you wiped it out?
Well, in Palm Beach County, we've cleaned most of it up. There's still some work to do, but the problem still exists in other places. Mm-hmm. And because there's still money to be made, as long as the Affordable Care Act is still providing fee-for-service reimbursement to rehabs, where the more services you provide, the more money you make, you're going to get bad actors infiltrating the industry and stealing business away from the good players in the industry and just billing, and kicking back money to the patients and the sober homes. And it's a big gravy train. It's a windfall. So Congress needs to turn off the spigot. And I don't mean ending the Affordable Care Act. I just mean tweaking it so that you have, instead of a fee-for-service reimbursement model, how about an outcome-based reimbursement model? We already have that when it comes to Medicare hospitals within the same Affordable Care Act, where the good hospitals who accept Medicare get paid more for their better results and the bad ones get paid less. So why don't we reward the good providers as opposed to the bad providers? Because we know who the bad providers are. We know who the corrupt ones are, and it would be helpful if the federal government would assist us instead of forcing us to fight this fight with one hand tied behind our backs.
Well, I appreciate your, my story with my family member, and I appreciate your efforts to combat this. Really, you've done a yeoman's job there, Dave, and I'm very grateful, and a lot of folks in the recovery community are too. Hey, listen, before we go, I want to ask you, I know a lot of our listeners are going to be familiar with you because they see you in the morning when they're having their coffee and Wheaties. Are Wheaties still a thing? I'm looking at Ryan. He's young. Okay, he's nodding. Yes, thank you. So how fun is it to be on Morning Joe with those guys? How much fun is that for you?
Oh, I love doing it. Thanks for asking. I've been in the studio just a couple times, and that's just a thrill in itself. But most of the time I do it from the computer here and using Skype. And it is it's an amazing experience because you get to espouse your viewpoints to, over 1 million people. And, that's in this day and age when we have so many legal issues and the law can be kind of intimidating some people because they use all these Latin terms and, all these technical phrases. And I try to make it accessible to people. Say, hey, look, this is what's really going on here. And then I throw in a few gags and, metaphors and I just love doing it and be able to have such an audience. And I hear from people all across the country. And I just am so thankful for the opportunity, and I hope to continue doing it.
Well, I hope that you'll be a regular on our show because we get you're a real kick. So there's that. All right, we've been here with the OG Dave Aronberg and the other OG Dara Kam. Thanks a lot, Dave. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really do hope that you come back again.
Thanks so much, Dara. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you and your listeners.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Kam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.